Hi, this is Chris, and welcome to today's Literably 101 webinar training. Let's take a look at today's training agenda. By the end of today's training, you'll understand three main things. 1. What Literably is. 2. Why schools and districts are using Literably. 3. How you yourself can use Literably. And with that, we'll look at a lot of different items, but I've broken it down into three main buckets. 1. We'll look at setting up your account and logging into Literably for the first time. 2. We'll look at the student experience on Literably. And 3. We'll check out your teacher dashboard and understanding different types of Literably data. And then towards the end of today's webinar, we'll look at some resources for learning more as well as getting help. So, what is Literably? Literably is an online literacy assessment system that does a few things. 1. It screens K-8 students for reading difficulties. 2. It helps monitor their progress as readers. And 3. It helps diagnose skill gaps as well. So how does Literably work? Well, a few things are going to happen. In a nutshell, first, your students are going to read aloud and answer questions on a device to complete a Literably assessment. And a device could include an iPad, a Chromebook, a laptop, or a desktop. 2. Literably's trained graders are going to then score each of your students' assessments. And then lastly, you're going to get your students' assessment results sent to you within 24 hours, both in an email from Literably as well as seeing those results updated on your teacher dashboard, which we'll look at today. So why are schools and districts using Literably? There are a lot of different reasons for this, but I wanted to highlight just a few. 1. Literably helps provide a consistent data point across all your classrooms, since our trained graders will be scoring all of your assessments in one standardized way. 2. Literably helps teachers understand their students' reading levels, and both their strengths and their weaknesses. 3. Literably gives teachers data to inform their instruction, and you can see some of those different data points in parentheses. We'll look at those today. And then lastly, Literably helps save teachers time. So, for today, the majority of our webinar is going to look at how you can use Literably. And again, I'm just flashing on your screen the three main things that we're going to look at. The reason for that is I'm going to start clicking a lot in the Literably product itself. So with that, let's look at this first bullet point, setting up your Literably account and logging in for the first time. So to do that, I'm going to go to literably.com/login, and here's where I can log into the product. If you were working at a site that uses Clever, you'll be able to log into Literably through a Clever login portal. You can see an example of that on your screen here. You may be able to log into that Clever portal via a button on your district website or school website as well, and you'll have more information about that as you start to get going with Literably. If you work at a site that is not using Clever, you can log in by clicking I'm a teacher and then putting in your school or district email, as well as a password that will be provided to you. And then click Log In. So we've just logged into Literably for the first time, and we're now looking at your Literably teacher dashboard. You'll notice that this dashboard looks somewhat empty, and that's to be expected the first time that you log into Literably as a teacher. So, why should you log into Literably before your students assess? There are a few main reasons that I want to highlight. One is, I would recommend that you log into Literably before your students start assessing and look under this name column where your students will be listed and make sure that you in fact have the correct students listed there. If you don't, please reach out to your Literably point of contact at your site and they can help you with that. The other main thing to do is turn your attention to this next assessment column. So what this column is showing you is for each of your students, It's displaying the guided reading A to Z level that your students will assess on Literably the first time that they log in. If I click on this drop down here, you'll notice that Literably uses guiding reading levels A to Z, and that for each A to Z letter, we've put in parentheses the grade level that that letter corresponds to. At each A to Z level, Literably provides a combination of fiction and nonfiction texts for students to read. For each A to Z level, Literably has on average 8 to 10 different texts, and at each grade level as a whole, Literably has on average 30 to 36 different texts. And so our hope is that students never have to assess on the same Literably text more than once. If you ever want to check out what's in the Literably text that your students will be reading, you can click on this magnifying glass here to see the story introduction, the story itself, and then if you scroll down, the comprehension questions that students will be asked, and we'll look at those later today. So, why do I show you this? I show you this for one main reason. One is I would recommend that for each of your students, you make sure before they start assessing that they're starting at a reasonable A to Z level, based on what you know about your students' reading strengths and weaknesses. As a default, Literably is going to start each of your students at the beginning A to Z level for their grade. So in this example, for Frodo Baggins, we would expect that his teacher is a second grade teacher, and we've automatically placed him at level K. If you're a third grade teacher, as a default, Literably is going to place your students at level N. However, you as teachers can use your discretion to manually adjust these levels if you'd like by clicking on the drop-down and changing the level from a K to an L. And you'll notice that the new group of L text now displays. Great. So as a recap, before your students start assessing, we would recommend that you sign into your teacher dashboard and do two main things. One, make sure you have the right students in your dashboard. And two, make sure that they're starting at a reasonable starting place under their next assessment column. The next thing that we're going to look at today is the student experience on Literably. So check out Frodo Baggins. He's scheduled to read Mountain Meg at level L text. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to now sign out of Literably as a teacher by clicking Log Out. And I'm back at the Literably login page. Again, as a reminder, if you work at a site that is using Clever, your students will be able to log into Literably via a Clever login portal. For today, I'm going to show you how you can log in if you're not using Clever. To do that, you'll just click, or your students will just click, I'm a student, and then they have two main options. One, they can type in their name or their username, as well as a password that will be provided to them by their site. The other way they can log in is by typing in their teacher's email address and then selecting their name from a student dropdown. So today we'll pretend to be Frodo. After that, all students need to do is click Login, and when they do that, they'll be presented with a book introduction that will be read aloud to them. Let's check that out.
This book is called Mountain Meg. Read to find out what happens when a big, fierce lion sees Meg.
So that was an example of the book introduction. The main thing your student needs to do next is just click Next Page, and then they'll be presented with the story. Their text will be blurred out to begin, as well as pictures if they're reading a text with pictures. And all they need to do at this point is click Start. And then their main job is to read into their device the text on the screen out loud. When they get to the end of page 1, they'll just click next page, and then they'll be able to continue reading the story here on page 2. Students will then read to the end of the story, and when they get to the end, all they need to do is click stop. After a student clicks stop, they'll have 3 main options. So let me say a bit about each of these options. The first option is to click play back. If a student clicks play back, they'll actually hear themselves as they just read. Some teachers like to have students do this to build their self-awareness of their reading patterns and habits. The second option is to click record again. So this is in place in case a student is reading, and let's say their principal comes over the intercom and disrupts them while they're assessing. In that case, the student can just click stop and record again to start fresh with their assessment. The third main option is to click comprehension. So let's check that out. So each Literably assessment at all levels through A to Z, there will be 5 multiple choice comprehension questions. Here's an example of one. I'd like to point out that for each question and answer choice, students have the option to click on a microphone and have those questions or answer choices read aloud. The thought being that we're really trying to assess students' comprehension here and not their decoding skills, so we don't want to penalize them if they're not quite sure how to decode the word scrambling. And if they can't, they can click this microphone. At this stage, all students need to do is find the correct answer choice that they believe is right and click the dot next to it, and that'll take them to question 2. They can then continue to answer the questions by clicking on those dots and use the arrows on the left and right side to check their answers if needed. The other thing to highlight is that students can click this return to reading button at the bottom right hand corner to go back to the actual assessment and look for information. The reason for this is on the comprehension questions, we're really trying to assess students' comprehension and not strictly their recall. And so we want to provide them with the ability to look for information and meaning in the text itself. Once they've found what they're looking for, students can just click this comprehension button in the top left corner, and they're back at question 3. They can then make their answer choice here until they get to question 5. When they answer question 5, the final multiple choice comprehension question, they'll be brought to the last section of the Literably assessment, which we often refer to as the retell. In this section, students are asked to tell as much as they can about the passage they just read. Students have 2 options here. 1, they can type their retell, or 2, they can click this Start Recording Answer button and verbally describe or explain into their device what happened in the story. I'll note here that Literably does not currently grade these student retells. We have not found an objective and satisfactory way to do that, given the variety of students and texts and partners that we work with, but we do provide teachers with this data and the ability to score the retells themselves if they'd like. Once students have finished the retell, all they need to do is click I'm done, log out, and at that point, we'll be brought back to the Literably login page. And as a reminder, Literably's trained graders would then be receiving those audio files from that student and starting to grade that assessment. So the last main thing that we'll look at today is we'll look at what your teacher dashboard will look like after you do your first round of assessments on Literably. So to do that, I'm going to sign back in as a teacher by putting in my email and password. Done that, and now I will click log in. Great. So now we're back at a teacher dashboard. You'll notice, unlike earlier, there's a lot more data on this dashboard. and of course a lot more colors as well. So what I'd like to do is look at a student example and make sure we understand what Literably is telling us. So I'd like to turn your attention to the student Ron Weasley up here in the top left corner. And then I'd like to draw your attention to the last assessment column for Ron Weasley. So what do we know about Ron immediately? Well, we know a few things. We know that the most recent assessment that Ron took was the story Scrawny Cat, which is a level L text. We know that Ron read Scrawny Cat with 97.6% accuracy. We know that Ron read Scrawny Cat with 164 WCPM, which stands for words correct per minute. And we know that Ron got 5 out of 5 of those comprehension questions right on that story for a 100% comprehension score. And we know that Ron took that assessment on March 20th, 2019. So what does Literably do with that data? Literably does a few things, and I want to highlight those on the dashboard, but then also explain where those recommendations and determinations on the dashboard are coming from. So let me turn your attention towards this next assessment column. So one thing that Literably is going to do is it's going to take into account Ron's assessment data and how he performed on Scrawny Cat, and then automatically move up, down, or keep at the same level Ron's next assessment level. In this case, Literably has automatically moved Ron's next assessment level up from an L to an M, and we've automatically selected that level M text for you, and the story is Baseball's Best. As a quick side note, left untouched by the teacher, Literably is automatically going to alternate between fiction and nonfiction texts as your students continue to read on Literably, so you can rest assured that your students will be getting a healthy dose of both. So that's one thing we'll be doing. I'm going to skip these two columns momentarily and come over here to this instructional level column. The other thing that Literably is going to do is try to provide you with Ron's instructional level. In this case, you'll notice that we are estimating Ron's instructional level at an M, and that's what that asterisk means. It means that we're estimating the student's instructional level. So what does that mean to estimate an instructional level? Well, in this case, what it means is that Ron read this level L text Scrawny Cat with fairly high accuracy and comprehension. Literably believes that most likely Ron's instructional level is at an M. However, we won't know that with certainty until Ron actually attempts to read this level M story, Baseball's Best. It's possible that when Ron reads this text, he does extremely well again, and then in fact his instructional level is actually more like an N. It's also possible that when Ron reads Baseball's Best, perhaps he does really poorly, and in fact his instructional level isn't quite an M yet and is still at an L. We're not sure for certain yet, but Literably's best guess based on the data is that his instructional level will end up being an M. Great. So let's return to these other two columns I skipped a second ago. The other thing that Literably is going to provide for you is the student's estimated independent level. So that can be a great data piece for teachers if you're having students read by themselves at a library and you need them to pick out a good fit book. The other column that you're noticing is we also have a reassessment recommended column. If you see a reassessment icon next to a student in this column, it means that the student has performed extremely well on their last graded assessment or extremely poorly on their last graded assessment. In those cases, Literably thinks it potentially could be worthwhile to have those students reassess, because we're not quite sure and we don't have the best sense of where their true instructional level is. I just want to emphasize that these reassess icons are definitely recommendations, and we ultimately leave it up to teachers whether or not they want to follow them. Similarly, if you see a student that does not have a reassess recommended icon next to him or her, you as a teacher can still have them assess immediately if you think it's warranted. So that's a quick overview of what the different columns on the Literably dashboard refer to and mean. I'd briefly like to just give you a sense for where these different data points, recommendations, and determinations are coming from, so you have that context. So I'm going to click up here on this tab, and we're going to find the Literably leveling grid. And I just want to say a few things about this. So by no means, if you're watching this webinar, do you need to memorize this. But at a very high level, I just wanted to mention that when your students assess, Literably is primarily taking into account two main things. On the left-hand side, we're taking into account how accurately students read their assessments. And across the top, we're taking into account how well they do on those comprehension questions. And between those two data points, you'll start to see those different items happen on the dashboard that we were just looking at. So if students do particularly well, you might see their next assessment levels move up in green. You might see them stay at the same level in yellow, or you might see their levels move down in red. If students do extremely well on their assessments in the top left corner, or extremely poorly in this bottom right-hand corner, you might see Literably display those reassessment recommended icons. And then, as it relates to the instructional level, I'd like you to turn your attention towards these yellow cells. What Literably says is that if a student has read a text with at least 90 to 94% accuracy and at least 60% comprehension, that we feel that we have found that student's instructional level. So that's where that comes from. Let's head back to the teacher dashboard. Before we move on to the next section, I quickly want to mention that these dashboard columns are sortable, and you can sort them by clicking, and that Literably is also color coding each student's instructional level by grade level expectations at different points of the year. So if we're looking at this instructional level column, in red we see that Percy Jackson's instructional level is below grade level expectations. These two students in yellow are approaching grade level expectations. These two students in green are on or meeting grade level expectations. And these students below are exceeding grade level expectations. We also do something similar for students' reading rate, and you can see that on the right-hand side of your dashboard. So, this dashboard gives you a nice snapshot of what's going on in your classroom and can be helpful in detecting patterns and trends amongst your students and potentially help you in forming and determining reading groups. But one thing that you might want to do as a teacher is see what happened on a specific assessment itself. So let's check out the student Harry Potter, and I'm wondering what happened when he read the story Crouching Tiger. To get more information about this, all you'll need to do is hover over the name of the assessment the student read and click. Great. We're now looking at an example of a graded Literably assessment. Let me quickly highlight a few things you can expect to have access to. So, in the top right corner, you'll notice that you can click play and click on the audio file of the student reading and listen as many times as needed to how the student read this particular assessment. Here in this box, we've repasted the assessment results that you saw on the dashboard previously for easy access. On the left-hand side, what you're seeing is Literably's version of a running record. So if you're familiar with running records, you'll expect to see all the same notations that you're used to. For example, you'll see when students make substitutions, she for he, when students make self-corrections, and that's what this SC notation refers to, grandma into grandpa. You'll also see when students insert words that aren't part of the text, or where students skip words. And then at the end of when the grading stops, you'll see this double line bracket. Across the right-hand side, Literably also provides an MSV miscue analysis for every E, air, and SC self-correction. Let's keep scrolling down. Below the running record, you as a teacher have the ability to type in notes that will be saved to this assessment. And below that, you see the comprehension questions and answer choices that the students selected for this story. The bold answer choice is the correct answer. The dot is what the student selected. So you'll quickly notice in this example that the student got question 1 and 2 correct, but missed question 3. Let's keep scrolling down to the end of the assessment. At the end of the assessment, you have access to the student's retell. In this example, I quickly know that the student tried to type their retell, and I've highlighted what they typed there. Had the student recorded their retell, you would see a play button and you'd be able to click play to listen to that retell. As a reminder, Literably does not score or grade these retells, but we do provide you with the ability to grade them yourselves as a teacher using this 1 to 4 rubric. And if you'd like, you can use our scoring guide to help you determine what type of grade you want to give your student on their retell. Great. Let's scroll back up to the top. And I'll quickly mention that you can print these graded assessments. And we also have this thing called a secret access link. If I click this, a URL is generated that could be hypothetically copied and pasted into, let's say, an email and sent to a parent or sent to a colleague. And if they click on that link, that parent or colleague would have access to this one graded assessment for this student, Harry Potter. So, as your students continue to use Literably over the course of the school year, one common question that teachers often are wondering or asking themselves is, how is my student doing holistically? And how is my student doing over time? So Literably has a way for you to view that, and you can do so by clicking on this assessment history button for the student Harry Potter. However, more than likely, and I'm going to back out to the dashboard, you'll access that assessment history page by finding the student that you're interested in learning more about and clicking on their name. So I'm going to click on Harry Potter. And we're now at Harry Potter's assessment history page. So let me just highlight a few things here. So on the assessment history page, you'll see the student's name at the top and their grade. You'll see their current instructional and independent level. After your students have taken several assessments, you'll notice that Literably will start to track their words correct per minute and instructional level over time. Below that, you'll see Literably's comprehension tracker. So as some context, Literably has grouped every Literably comprehension question by question type. So we've separated questions into detail types of questions, main idea types of questions, and so on and so forth. And then we're telling you, how is that student done on those particular types of questions? As an example, in this left-hand cell, I know that the student Harry Potter has been asked 12 detail comprehension questions on Literably, and that he has gotten 9 out of those 12 correct. Below the comprehension tracker, you're seeing a list of all the graded recordings that this student has taken, and these graded recordings will be saved with the student across multiple school years. So you, at any time, can hover over the assessment for the student that you care about, click, and see those assessment details. We'll also provide any recordings that a student took, but which Literably was not able to grade. There are a few reasons why Literably might not be able to grade an assessment, and as a teacher, it's good to be aware of. In this case, the student read the story Daisy Dawson is on Her Way. However, this student may have only recorded themselves for, as example, 5 or 10 seconds. And in that case, Literably would not be able to grade that assessment accurately. So that's why it says too short here. Let me scroll back up to the top and also mention that we also provide a secret access link on this assessment history page. So if you click this, again, a URL will be generated that you could copy and paste and send to a parent or colleague. And if they click that, they'll then have access to all of this student's graded recordings that they can then look and listen to. So let me back out as we start to wrap up and take a look at the Literably dashboard one last time. Before we conclude today's webinar, I just want to make mention of a few other things to be aware of. One is we have some advanced tools up here that I encourage you to check out. And up here in the top right, you can click on your teacher email to change your password or run different types of data exports. Down here in the bottom right, if you want to contact our support center, you can click this Contact Us button and send our support center a quick message. And then lastly, I wanted to mention a cool feature which we call the Login as a Demo Student feature. When you're rolling out Literably to your class for the first time, I would highly encourage you to check this out. If you click this button, you'll see that there are some prompts you can follow to log in as a demo student. And this allows you as a teacher to talk to your students about Literably itself, the assessment, and what you want them to do when they're taking their reading assessments for the first time. Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed this Literably 101 training webinar. The last thing to mention as we conclude is that if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us, support@literably.com. And we also have a help center, which you saw a bit of today, which you can always check out for additional resources on Literably. And with that, thank you and have a great day.